Hey, Jason, welcome to the Startup Sidebar podcast. I'm really excited to have you here.
Samar, it's a pleasure and an honor to be here with you and your audience. I'm excited to be here as well.
Wonderful. On this podcast, we usually talk about legal matters, but I think this is legal adjacent, right? These are all the kind of nuts and bolts, boring, blocking and tackling type of items that startup founders and entrepreneurs have to deal with. So I'm excited to have you.
Oh, that's great. And I used to work in contracts in aerospace and defense, so I'm not scared of a little legalese.
It's fun. Legalese is so much fun, right?
Absolutely. Love it. Love it. And it comes up all the time, right? And especially in deal making, it's a really important part of understanding and being able to structure good deals. So excited to be here, to be able to talk with you and the audience through startups, legalese, exit, M&A, all that good stuff this morning.
That's wonderful. Yeah. Can you give us a little bit of background on yourself and we'll go from there?
Sure. So my name is Jason Brown. I'm an M&A advisor and business broker based here in San Antonio, Texas, actually office not too far from Summer. I have been doing this for the past 3 years on my own, working corporate mergers and acquisitions. Before that, I spent some time working in startups. So I have a perspective and a view in working with small technology-based companies. My focus today is really on helping small business owners prepare for and exit their businesses. And I also work with buyers to help them structure their thoughts and their plan around acquiring businesses.
That makes a lot of sense. And I think that's exactly the reason I wanted to talk to you. Most people are building startups to exit at some point, right? You could have a family business or a lifestyle business where you don't intend to exit. But I think some of these tips that we're talking about here are going to be helpful to those folks as well. And I think these are pretty universal business principles.
Absolutely. And I come from this school of begin with the end in mind. So Stephen Covey, for those who are old enough to remember, is a key principle in any business that you're running and operating, regardless of if it's a lifestyle business or a high growth tech startup. And so excited to share some thoughts around what you need to do to prepare your business in startup phase to be prepared to sell, to be attractive to buyers. Because while I'm sure we all love the journey, we're all working towards that end goal of having a successful business that we can turn over to the next owner.
Yeah, that's a great overview. And let's just jump right into it. What is the first tip that you'd want to share with the audience?
Absolutely. So regardless of whatever business you're in or you're building, it's really important to have a vision and clarity, more than one or two pages in a pitch deck around what is the exit for that business. And I'm a firm believer that you need to have some various scenarios that you build into that plan. There's always a base case, right? And so you're going to grow your business and there's somebody out there who's going to find what you're doing valuable. And there may be an upside case, right? You may be the next unicorn, but there's also a scenario in which there's a downside case. And so what happens if you don't get the product market fit that you're looking for? What happens if you're not the key strategic cog in a big company's portfolio? What do you do then? And how do you build your business to be attractive and valuable to buyers that fit those different sets of scenarios? I think it's really important to think about and to have some clarity on as you start and embark on the journey. And while you're going along, continue to check in to see how are you building this business really to meet the needs of a future buyer.
That makes sense. And how does that work from a kind of a nuts and bolts perspective? Do you typically, or do you recommend startup founders have this in a document somewhere? Is it more informal? How would you formalize this?
Yeah, so I think it starts with strategy. And I do think it needs to be written down in a document, and it's a living document, right? So it's not a static piece that never changes. It's something that you're going to go back to. I mean, in a startup, you're pivoting constantly. You're learning constantly. Where and how you provide and deliver value is constantly evolving as you go through different phases of the journey. But keeping an eye to who does this matter to, not only from a customer perspective, but also from a future potential acquirer's perspective. So I think about it even into, again, the pitch deck to me gets simplified into one or two pages as to what is the exit. And a lot of times I think that's just, there's not necessarily a depth of analysis or strategy that goes into that. And so I recommend that there's a several page analysis that goes into what makes sense and why. And as things change in the marketplace, that's going to evolve. Talking to those potential acquirers and understanding where their strategic roadmap is leading is getting helpful to inform what actually they're looking for. And are you in line and aligned with that? And the degree to which you're not, then it's shifting, right? It's understanding that today with the solution that you're building for whatever problem you're trying to solve, the actual person that finds that valuable in their portfolio may be different tomorrow than it is today. So again, I think it's a living, breathing document, and it's through conversations and doing analysis and keeping in tune with where markets are going that informs what that potential exit plan looks like for your company.
Makes a lot of sense. I do something similar on the patent side, right? Often when clients come to me, they think, yeah, we're getting a patent and it's a check mark. But the first conversation that I have is who's going to find these patents or pieces of IP valuable? So this is what we do. And maybe we should refine this based on my conversation with you here. But what we do is we say, okay, who are the most likely acquirers of this technology? And can we build a piece of patent or a portfolio that is complementary to that business, right? That will allow them to say, hey, this fits a strategic need. This patent portfolio fits a strategic need or a hole in our IP portfolio. So it becomes much more valuable and strategic for them to acquire it, or they want to keep it out of the hands of some of their competitors. So we think about what is that piece of IP or that portfolio that is going to fit a strategic need for a potential acquirer. We also think about the technology curve of how the industry is going to evolve. Usually startups are in a fast moving space, and usually the solution that they have is suboptimal relative to the incumbents. But as the technology evolves and grows, will become optimal or maybe better than what the incumbents are providing. So we think about that trajectory. And then we also think about in case the company goes into bankruptcy. So I've had this happen to a couple of my clients where the startup went into bankruptcy, but their patent portfolio got acquired by other companies. And it is something you don't really want to think about necessarily as a founder. But in both of those scenarios, the founder had invested a lot of their personal money into the business, and getting the patent portfolio acquired was the difference between walking away with $0 versus walking away with some money in your pocket. So those are the three things that we think about. But it seems like these conversations need to happen pretty regularly and maybe on a more formalized business sense than what we're doing necessarily on the legal side.
And I think you're exactly right. So because it's not only your IP, it's really where's the value created. So I had a recent conversation with a very large multi-billion-dollar company, really around understanding what is their strategic roadmap. And they shared that there was a smaller company that they acquired because of the IP that was within the company. And so if you don't have IP, the process is still the same. What is the value that you're creating? And is it differentiated? If you're a me too, if your solution, 15 solutions to the problem that you're solving and anybody can do it, I think there's a more fundamental question to ask and answer in your business. But assuming that you do have a unique value proposition, same question, who finds it valuable? What does the technology roadmap look like? I think you go through the same process, whether it's IP or not. If the startup fails, is there something here that somebody will find value in, and how do you monetize that so you can recoup some of that investment? So I think you're spot on in the steps that you take. And the case I would make for all startup entrepreneurs is that's a process that you should go through, whether or not you have IP or not, because it's really around where and how do you create value and how you extract that value in different scenarios as you move forward. You're spot on and providing very good counsel to your clients on that front.
I appreciate that. The other piece that I think was really interesting in your answer is to have ongoing conversation with potential acquirers or just industry players. You just never know who is going to find what you do interesting and who's going to have a strategic need or an immediate need for what you do. I think that's really good advice as well. I think startup founders should be doing that all the time.
Absolutely. And I've sat in the seat. So I've worked on an innovation team in a very large property and casualty insurance company. And so I was doing a consulting project with them, right? Large companies. So they make this make buy decision, right? Do we innovate internally or do we go out and acquire? And both of those need to align to some sort of a strategic vision. So I sat in the seat of, okay, this is the capability that we need to be successful long term. Does it make sense for us to do it internally? So we're going to go out and scour the marketplace to identify where is there a solution. So imagine if you're involved in those conversations consistently and you have visibility and an understanding across whatever sector or industry you're in, where are things moving, right? Where are there issues and problems that they're going to be looking to solve for their customers? And how is it that you can help and position your business to be that asset that's going to be most valuable to helping them solve what's usually a much larger problem in terms of scale? And so from that seat, it was interesting to see how we went through and evaluated different companies. And those companies, again, we knew what we were looking for. And those companies that fit were the companies that got put onto the game board and assessed for potential acquisition. And so building those relationships and understanding whether it be internal VC groups, whether it be innovation teams, other business development folks within the companies in the space that you think are going to be your exit targets, they can be a huge advantage. Again, as you're thinking about how you serve your clients and how you create value with your clients to start to build in an alignment with who your ultimate acquirer is going to be. I've also been on those internal teams that have been challenged with building organic new opportunities, and it's not easy. And I think that's the competitive advantage that startups have in the space. Much more nimble, much more adept at identifying what's going on in the marketplace and figuring out how to get product market fit, figuring out how to do that initial scaling that bigger companies are just not equipped to do.
Right. Or it will take them twice as long and cost them twice as much or 3 times as much. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
Right.
So we didn't talk about this as a tip for startup founders, but I'm curious if they are talking to somebody like you in your previous position, how can they have a more effective conversation? My guess is that you want to just gather as much information about the company, right, as possible. What are they interested in and what are strategic objectives and milestones for them, just so you can direct your conversation the right way. But do you have tips for talking to somebody like yourself in your previous position?
Absolutely. So it is about creating value and immediate value, right? And so a part of it is being able to understand who their customer is, who their end user is. It's particularly in our situation, it was trying to build deeper relationships with customers and clients. And so having someone come in and be able to take a meeting that can demonstrate how they've done that with their own clients, to be able to speak the language of those folks that you are talking to that were potential acquirers, and to show insight that they may not have. I think this is the biggest thing. If you can bring insights into their customers that they don't currently have, it's huge value in the interaction. So everyone's busy, everyone has a lot going on. And so the question is, am I going to take a second meeting if the first meeting didn't prove to be valuable? So in every interaction is, what are you bringing to the table to deliver value? And so if it's, you've done 100 customer interviews, you've got 10,000 customers, and here's some really unique customer insights that you can bring to the table that the potential acquirer would find valuable. That's how you become a person of interest. That's how you become a person that delivers value, just through the interactions. And I think that also plays into the overall assessment. So understand customers, understand business models, so the degree to which you can understand how they're trying to make money at what they're doing, and providing that value independent of an acquisition gets you more airtime. It gets you to be relevant into the conversation on an ongoing basis. It makes them almost want to call you, right? That's the goal, is, hey, they're trying to understand what's going on with the customers and how to make their customers happy and solve more problems for their customers. And so if you can help deliver that information, we talk about information being currency. You oftentimes, as startup owners, the startup founders and owners, are closer to the customer than the big behemoth out there who's going to ultimately acquire it. You have boots on the ground and knowledge and insights that they don't have, that can be potentially very valuable for them, and also help them connect the dots. So that'll also help them understand how your solution, the understanding of the customer, and their capabilities can all be tied together to deliver more value for everybody involved. Figure out how to deliver value in every conversation that you're going to have. Otherwise, you're not going to have very many conversations with those individuals, because they're very busy and there are a lot of people who want to get into the office to see them.
That makes sense. This is really good advice, and I'm glad we got into it, because when my team talks to prospective clients, for example, we try to have this metric, internal metric in your head, that you should be delivering an insight every minute, right? Because prospective clients don't have the time, and often talking to a lawyer is burdensome more than interesting and fun. So yeah, this is what we do. And this is the advice that I used to work at a big firm and that I used to give junior attorneys all the time. I was doing patent litigation. You are often dealing with $10 million plus litigations, and you usually have 100 million pages of documents to review in these litigations. And for a junior attorney to add value to that litigation, where the partners are usually doing strategy work and kind of high level testimony and depositions. So how can a junior person add value? And I think it's by knowing all the documents, right? If you can provide insight into kind of the paper level of the case, then you get more airtime with the senior people. and you get more insight into strategy and you can get invited into those conversations. There's a lot of the same concepts there.
Absolutely. And I do it in my business. So most of my work is with small and medium sized businesses.
Jason, so what is the second tip that you have for startup founders who are thinking about these things?
Absolutely. So there's a question in the startup world as to how do you grow, right? And so do you grow organically? Do you go out and acquire more customers? Or do you grow inorganically? Or even how do you start? So I think one of the big questions is how do you grow? Inorganically, which is through acquisition, or do you grow organically? So you go out and invest and you are the person that's driving sales in the company. I think there's a case to be made, Summer, to consider inorganic growth, and even from the beginning. So if you have a great idea about how to go to market and tackle a problem in a new way, I think there's something to be said for going out and looking at potentially acquiring a business that's operating in that space, particularly if you don't have deep industry knowledge and experience, and if you're having trouble or challenges around financing. So if you can go and buy a business in the space, lots of financing options for that'd be another conversation for another day, or we can go deeper if you'd like. But you now have cash flow from an existing operation that can fund the innovation that you're looking to bring to market. You now have connections with an existing customer base that provides you insights as to how you can best deploy and develop the solution to the problem that you're looking to bring to market. And so I think it's an important consideration for startups, both at the initial stage and as you get into your business, as to does it make sense, just like the corporations do, to go out and acquire? Is there enough synergy value there? By synergy, combine the 1+1=3 value, that it makes sense to go out and find and acquire or merge with someone else in the marketplace to give you strength. We all know that as you scale, the business becomes more resilient. So the smaller you are, the more challenging it is. It's hardest to get to your first million, hardest to get to your first X number of customers. And so I encourage startup founders to consider inorganic or acquisition as a means of getting into a space and as a means of generating cash flow versus having to go out and raise capital and having to spend time that could be spent on developing your business really around capital raise. That's a big part of the startup experience, is making sure that you have funding. And so that's a really interesting alternative way to think about and consider funding your business. Also means that potentially you end up holding a lot more the equity, the ventures, the risk, gets you further along the road to having a stable business.
That's pretty cool. I'm sure a lot of startup founders haven't thought about this. I have a couple of questions, maybe from a macro perspective and maybe some details, if that's okay.
Absolutely.
When startups are thinking about this in particular, are they thinking about, or do you recommend that they think about this kind of vertically or horizontally? How should they prioritize maybe these opportunities, or what should they be thinking about? I know you mentioned cash flow being important, but yeah, what are some of the metrics that you would look at and think about?
Absolutely. I mean, I think it starts with customer, right? Because most times startups are solving a problem. Customer acquisition is not cheap in many cases, right? And so and it has to be complementary. So whatever solution you think you're bringing to solve the problem, you want to look at a customer. And so can you get into a business that's serving the same sets of customers, understanding the existing business model? And can you keep running that business model? And is it somewhat complementary to whatever solution that you're planning to bring? So having a solution or serving a set of customers in two different disparate spaces is less attractive of an option than if you're a potential bolt-on opportunity to an existing problem that this business is solving. So I look at it as first the customer base. So you want to be serving the same sets of customers as we talked about before. A lot of time, that's whether it's B2C or B2B, a lot of that value is understanding and having a relationship of how you create and extract value with that customer. Uh, And so being able to align yourself with a business that's playing in the same market and again has a complementary business model, that's where I think it starts. Cash flow is it, and that becomes the financing side of it, right? So you can typically get a loan for 10% of the value. If there's real estate involved, you can get a longer period of time. But again, you can then use the cash flow from that business to fund and finance the innovation that you're looking to bring to market, but it's just less risky. So we talked about before the downside of you've built a company, you have IP and you go into bankruptcy as the downside. So we look at the downside if you go in and you were to acquire an asset that's aligned as the innovation that you're bringing to market doesn't work. And your fallback position is not you're bankrupt, but you've got a kind of core business asset that will continue to run. And again, just allows more flexibility. What's the next problem you can solve using the cash flow from the business? But it doesn't get you overextended. So especially if you're early and depending on, again, your ability to capital raise and the options you have for financing, this could be another way to get into the market and to really drive your solution into the marketplace.
That makes a lot of sense. What I tell clients from an IP perspective is maybe somewhat similar. We always talk about building the most strategic or the most valuable patent possible. And maybe we should include some of these metrics, but we always think about who owns the customer relationship.
Mm,
Usually those patents tend to be the most valuable because they usually can have the most kind of price flexibility. The further you are away from the customer, the more commoditized you can get. And the closer you are to the customer, the more differentiated your product can be. So we always think about this as let's look at the chain and in getting market to the customer and where do we fit in on that chain? And then how can we occupy the most valuable or important portion of that chain? But what you're saying, I think, is also, in addition to that, also think about horizontally as well as opposed to just vertically.
yes,
But aligning yourself to the customer is probably the safest way to build a model around all this stuff.
absolutely. It's critical to the lifeblood of the company, right? And as the customer,
Okay, very good.
go ahead. Yep.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Jason.
No, I was going to say to just echo your point of being tied to the customer is super important, especially as their needs consistently change and being able to adapt to that and continue to create value for the customer. Those are the folks that extract the majority of the value from the relationship. So 100% agree here.
And that's also a challenge, right? From my legal perspective, it's pretty easy for me to keep a few of these priorities straight. But for business owners, it's okay. You're thinking about acquisitions and talking to companies, as we talked about in your last tip, while also aligning yourself to the customer. It's tricky, but something that I think successful startups have to navigate.
Yeah, and I think that leads to the next thing that I would encourage, and it's really about building the team. No one person can go out there and be a superstar in all these various elements and aspects of the business. And so it also devalues the business. So if you're the only person that's able to navigate all these different conversations and different value levers within the company, it inherently limits the value. If the company becomes too closely tied to you as the founder, and so the question becomes, how do you minimize that as a risk to the business? And I'd argue it's building the right team, right? That's you bring in the right folks that have the skill set to be able to tackle these various challenges, that you build company based on the people independent of yourself. Also putting in the right systems and tools and processes as that time comes. I get it. Startups are it moves really quickly. And so things are changing fast and you don't want to spend a whole lot of time investing in really putting hard wires into the business. But it's really important to think through how are you going to do that? Because it'll always be fast. And at some point in time, you do need to have the right players. Things are going to scale within the team, right? It's when you have 5 people, it's easy to manage, right? You guys can all have conversations. As the teams quickly expand, how do you ensure consistency in messaging? How do you ensure that each person that's touching the customer is projecting the company in the right way and that the customer's having the same experience with everybody throughout the company? And so I think these are also really important things founders and any business owner really to be thinking about is how does the organization achieve its objectives independent of you? So you have the vision, you understand what all the pieces need to be, but it's super important to bring on the right team and to make sure that the communication channels are there such that the team understands what needs to be done. And also figuring out when and how do you plug in the right structure. So that way, if any one person is not there, it gives the company a fighting chance at survival. Super important. It can't be done alone, right? I think that's what I want everyone to take away. Think closely and carefully about who you're bringing in and how you're building the culture within the team. Because if I want to buy a business, that's the first thing I'm looking at, not the founder, unless the founder's staying on board, and if the founder's staying on board, great. But it's the rest of the team, right? Who's on this team? And is that a team that I want to play with and that I want within the broader context of our team? So always encourage founders to spend the time to build out the team and download knowledge, figure out how to get all of that knowledge and the learnings that they're having and all of the permutations and adaptations that the business goes through. How do we create institutional knowledge? I think that is part of the IP, right? That's part of the intangibles of the company, figuring out how you capture that, bottle it, and ensure that that's going to continue to be something that an acquirer can benefit from is an important part of the equation as well.
That's music to my ears, Jason. I wish all my clients would come and talk to you about this. We talk a lot about value capture and from an IP perspective and how can we use that to add value to the company. But the other important piece of that is how do you de-risk your business, right? Not from your perspective, but from the perspective of a potential acquirer or a buyer, right? Because when you see your business, you may see all this opportunity and growth potential. But when a buyer sees your business, they're just looking at a bunch of risk factors and they're seeing how they can manage those or minimize those.
That's right. That's right. And so I had a conversation recently with a gentleman looking to buy a business, and it really is how do you look at the opportunity, right, your business through the lens of the buyer? Because the buyer was essentially deducting from the value everything they would have to invest in the business to make it deliver what the expectation is. And so I think the more that you can build into the business that the buyer doesn't have to, right? When the buyer says, okay, I see that this person has layered in all of these pieces that we've talked about. They've got diversified customer base, really close, tight-knit relationship with the customer. They built out their IP portfolio and they brought in someone like yourself to make sure that that's fully protected and they're going to be able to leverage that. They've built the team and the business isn't reliant upon the founder. Maybe the founder is looking at what's next. The team is dealing with what is. The buyer then looks at this and says, okay, I come in, I'm getting something that's already creating and delivering value. And they're thinking about the next step versus how do I just maintain and manage what's there? And the degree to which a buyer is having to maintain and manage what's there, and they're going to have to invest to get it to the next step as well, they're going to deduct on the value, right? And so you're going to extract less value if they've got to go in and put in a lot of these pieces. And I talk to business owners about that all the time. The destination is where the destination is. There's steps that it takes to get there. And please don't expect to extract the top value for your business if you haven't done the work to get it there. Whoever does the work is the one that's going to ultimately extract the value. And so hopefully the audience here is taking away tips that will allow them and enable them to go ahead and put these pieces in place, hard as it may be. Again, I don't minimize the amount of effort when you're putting in long hours, working every day to keep things moving. It's not an easy thing to do, but that's where the value is created, right? If it were easy, everybody would be doing it and it wouldn't be as valuable. But spend the time to invest working on your business, to be thinking strategically about how to move your business to the next level, in addition to the ground game, right? Which is how do you create value for your customers and deliver and extract that value. Building out the business is super important if you want to ultimately be able to exit and get full maximum value. Otherwise, the buyer's going to say, I've got to do the work now. So I'm going to give you a discount on what you think it's worth because I'm not going to pay you for the potential. I'm going to actually pay you for the work that you actually put into the business. And that's a really big distinction that I have that conversation a lot of times. It's potential. The fact that we can both see the potential, a lot of people see potential, right? It's those few special people that are able to execute and put the pieces in place to be able to bring that potential to reality that extract the most value in any business transaction.
That's a really good point and a really good one to leave on. I think the ground game that you talked about is important, and I think it's table stakes for startups, but it's the mind part of this, right? The mindset or the thought process around this. Because when you're building a product, you got to think about your customers and really put yourselves in their shoes. When you are having these conversations about acquisitions, you really need to put yourself in the shoes of the buyer. And then obviously when you're building the product, you got to also put yourself in the shoes of your employees, right?
Right.
That's, I think, what makes it hard, right? It's a process of taking yourself out of the equation in some way to build a great team, build a business that's viable and valuable to acquirers, and a business that delivers value to the customer, because that's what starts the whole thing. So I think that's really good advice to think about. I have a 7-year-old daughter that I talked to about this the other day, where, hey, the process of becoming an adult is to think more about what other people want or other people are thinking about, and less about what you want. So I think it's tough, but a good advice nonetheless.
Absolutely. I appreciate that. I actually had an opportunity to talk entrepreneurship to a fourth grade class last week, and we did talk about mindset, right? Because there's the only thing we can really control is ourselves. And it's really super important as you're going through the journey as a business owner, as a founder. To your point, a lot of pieces that you're juggling is to be self-aware of where are you strong, where are you not strong, where do you need to put effort into continuing to develop, not only for what the business and the stakeholders need today, but what they're going to need tomorrow. And so recognizing that you and your development is also a key critical part of the overall equation. Lots of ways to do that, which we can talk about another time, but also putting that on the list as investing in yourself, because there are a lot of people dependent upon you understanding where everything needs to go. And so taking care of yourself and making sure you're investing in yourself, I think, is another key takeaway I'd like to leave with everyone. It's important for the overall success of the venture that you're at the top of your game.
That's really cool. I am really glad to have you on this podcast with me. I think this is some really interesting. We've covered nuts and bolts all the way down to mindset, or all the way up to mindset. So I had a lot of fun talking about these things with you. I'm sure the audience did as well. Hey, Jason, if anybody wants to reach out to you to talk with you further, how can they connect with you?
Absolutely. So happy to chat. I enjoy business in general. Best place to reach me is via email, jason@pgpadvisory.com, or you can check us out on our website, which is pgpadvisory.com. I can also be reached via telephone, 210-580-4178. Please feel free to reach out. Happy to answer any questions that you may have, and wish you the best of luck in your journeys. Samar, thank you so much for having me on. Really enjoyed the conversation. And again, love being in this space and sharing tips on how we can all be successful together.
This is very cool. I'm really grateful to have you on, and I love talking business and strategy. So this is really fun. And we talk about this offline all the time. So I think it's valuable and important to put it out there and let other people in on the conversation. So thank you again, Jason. Really appreciate this, and hope to do this again soon.